Hey, wide awake family. If you're not part of the family yet and love creepy stories, then hit that subscribe button and join us. Tap the bell icon so you'll never miss a story. It really helps out the channel. If you've already done all that, then smash that like button to lock it in, and please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I would love to interact with you legends. Now to the story. I knew something was weird the second the elevator doors opened and I got hit with a mix of cigarette smoke, barbecue sauce, and that fake vanilla body spray people used to drown themselves in during high school. Rooftop parties always sound cooler than they actually are. You picture string lights swaying in the breeze, chilled drinks in ice buckets, some guy on an acoustic guitar doing sad covers, and instead it's 30 people screaming over a speaker that keeps skipping with a single bathroom that has a line longer than the bar downstairs. Still, Jackson grinned like he'd just unlocked a secret level, and I figured maybe he knew something I didn't. The building wasn't fancy. It was one of those half-renovated lofts where the outside looks like it survived a demolition, but the inside is painted white to make people think it's intentional. We walked up a flight because the elevator groaned like it hated us. When we pushed open the final door, there were strings of mismatched lights, an inflatable kiddie pool filled with lukewarm cans, and a DJ table that was really just a laptop and some guy in sunglasses pretending to twist knobs. Everyone was already sweaty, and it wasn't even 9 yet. The first girl who walked up to us hugged Jackson and then turned to me with this exaggerated smile. She said a name that wasn't mine. It caught me off guard, but I laughed it off because I thought maybe she matured. Then another guy fist bumped Jackson and called me the same wrong name. I thought maybe Jackson had introduced me wrong on purpose as a joke. I mean, sometimes people do dumb stuff like that to break the ice, but it kept happening. Everywhere we went on that rooftop, someone new would come up and greet me with that same name. A tall guy with a man bun. A girl in a mesh top who had glitter stuck to her teeth. Even the dude running the laptop/DJ booth leaned down, winked at me, and called me it. The whole thing started to feel less funny and more like I was a prop in a play I didn't audition for. I kept looking at Jackson, waiting for him to clear it up, but he just kept sipping from his red cup and acting like nothing was off. He clapped people on the back, laughed too loudly, then looked at me like I should just roll with it. After the 5th time someone used the wrong name, I stopped correcting them. It was easier to just let it hang there. The view from the rooftop wasn't even that good. You could see some blinking billboards and the tops of warehouses. The air smelled like hot tar. There were folding chairs scattered around, and people kept tripping over the cords running to the speakers. I tried to focus on little details, like the way one of the string lights buzzed every few seconds or how the kiddie pool liner made squeaky noises whenever someone leaned against it. Anything to keep my mind from spinning about why I was suddenly someone else. Halfway through the night, this girl with a pierced eyebrow sat next to me and asked how long Jackson and I had been back together. Back together. That's when it clicked. I wasn't just some random mistaken identity. Jackson had been parading me around as his ex. He hadn't slipped up with one introduction. He'd told everyone that's who I was before I even walked up there. My stomach did this slow flip like I'd eaten bad takeout. I didn't say anything right away because I was still trying to process it. But then I started noticing details. People weren't just calling me by the wrong name, they were giving me looks. Quick up and down scans, fake smiles that didn't reach their eyes, whispers behind plastic cups. Like they were checking to see if I lived up to whatever stories they'd read before. I wasn't me anymore, I was a replacement character in someone else's soap opera. Jackson kept moving through the crowd like he owned it. I watched him lean in close to talk to a girl with bright orange nails, laughing like it was the best joke in the world. He'd glance at me now and then like he was making sure I was still in place, still playing the role he'd shoved me into. I felt heat in my chest that had nothing to do with the sticky summer air. At one point, someone spilled a whole drink across the table near me, and the liquid dripped down onto the stairs below. People laughed it off, but I used it as an excuse to slip away. I stood by the edge of the rooftop, pretending to look at the skyline. The city stretched out like it always does, full of glowing windows and moving headlights. But I felt boxed in like the crowd behind me had built walls with their stares. The more I thought about it, the more twisted it felt. Jackson hadn't just lied. He'd built this entire night around me being a stand-in. He wanted his ex to see me, to see him with her again, like he was staging some kind of reunion just to get under her skin. The people around us weren't strangers, they were her friends, her circle. That's why they all knew the name. That's why they looked at me like I was both familiar and wrong at the same time. I pictured her walking in, seeing me, freezing in the doorway. I didn't even know what she looked like, but the thought of being compared to her made my skin crawl. It wasn't jealousy. It was more like being trapped in someone else's story, like my real self had been erased just so I could hit the beats of his drama. I finally pulled Jackson aside near the door to the stairwell. I didn't ask questions because I already knew the answers. His smirk gave it away before he even said anything. He just shrugged like it wasn't a big deal, like it was harmless. Like I should feel flattered that he trusted me and play along. I didn't play along. I walked down the stairs that smelled like mildew and old paint. The music thumped above me, muffled by concrete. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't check it. By the time I hit the street, the air felt cooler and the noise was just another hum blending into the city. I didn't bother waiting for Jackson. I didn't bother explaining myself to anyone. I just walked until the sound of the rooftop party was gone, until the wrong name stopped echoing in my head. Later that night, sitting in my room with the fan rattling in the window, I read over the evening again and again. Not because I missed it, but because it felt unreal, like a script I never agreed to. I didn't save his number. I didn't answer when he tried to call the next day. The rooftop, the wrong name, the fake reunion. It all stayed up there with the string lights and the kiddie pool. And me, I just went back to being myself, which felt heavier than usual, but at least it was mine. I wasn't even planning to go out that night. My plan was takeout, a half-watched show, and probably falling asleep on the couch with my shoes still on. Then Emma messaged. She had this way of typing like she was leaning against a door frame, casual but sure. She said she'd just gotten out of something, and she went to grab dinner. I didn't think much about the just got out part. People say that a lot, and you never know if it means last week or last year. I figured she just wanted to eat somewhere that wasn't her kitchen. I said yes. The restaurant was one of those spots that tries too hard to look effortless. Edison bulbs dangling too low, reclaimed wood tables that probably came from a Pinterest board, plants everywhere like they were auditioning for a jungle. I showed up a little late, damp from a quick jog because I missed the bus. She was already there, waving from a booth like we met before. She had this calm energy, the kind that makes you feel like you're not walking into a test. We ordered drinks, and she told me she was recently single. She didn't drag it out or go heavy about it. She said it like you'd say you just moved or switched gyms. She even laughed when she mentioned her ex, more like the laugh of someone closing a book than ripping a page. I thought, cool, she's in that stage where everything's new again. I didn't ask questions. I let her talk about her job in design, her figure hole in the wall taco spot, how she's been trying to get back into running. The waiter brought olives in a little dish, the kind with pits. She popped one like it was no big deal, but I was nervous about breaking a tooth, so I nibbled mine carefully, trying not to look like a kid scared of food. We shared a flatbread that came with whipped feta and this chili oil that burned just enough to make you notice. The music was all synth beats that sounded like they were picked by an algorithm, but it wasn't bad. For once, I didn't feel the urge to check my phone under the table or look around the room for distractions. Halfway through dinner, the front door swung open, letting in this blast of wet air. I wouldn't have looked up except Emma's face changed. Not panic, not anger, just the stillness that felt heavy. A guy walked in, holding a little kid who clung to his hoodie like Velcro. Another kid, a bit older, followed behind, eyes scanning the room. The guy spotted us instantly, adjusted the kid on his hip, and headed over. The table suddenly felt like the center of the restaurant. My stomach tightened because I knew this wasn't random. He didn't just walk in by chance. He walked in like he belonged in her story. The little kid's hand shot out toward Emma, and the older one leaned against the guy like they'd done this routine before. He didn't yell or slam his hands down. He just stood there, voice low, asking her to come home. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did, every word. It wasn't begging in the dramatic movie sense. It was worse. It was steady, careful, the voice of someone who tried everything else already. I sat frozen, hands under the table, thumb digging into the side of my chair. People around us were trying not to stare, but failing. I caught the waiter holding a tray and watching from the corner of his eye, ready to jump in, but not sure how. Emma reached for the little kid's hand without even thinking. It wasn't a choice, more like instinct. That's when I knew. Recently single didn't mean what I thought it did. Recently single meant the argument wasn't even finished. The door hadn't even fully closed. She whispered something to him, and he nodded. The kid shuffled to the door, waiting like they'd practiced it before. The guy's shoulders slumped, but he didn't push. He just stood there, hoodie damp, trying not to make the scene worse. I felt like a piece of furniture stuck in the booth with half a flatbread and no idea where to look. I wanted to be mad at her, but the whole thing was so raw it didn't fit into simple anger. The pendant light above buzzed softly. The chili oil pooled on the plate. The music switched to some slow track that made the silence even louder. She apologized to me quickly, barely above a whisper. Sorry like dropping a glass and knowing it can't be fixed. She told the waiter to split the bill. I tapped my card without looking, not even noticing how much. My appetite had left the table already. When she stood up, I did too. Because manners are automatic like that. She pulled on her coat, folded her napkin neatly, and walked to the door where the kids were waiting. They leaned into her instantly, like she was gravity, and they were just falling back into place. The guy opened the door, rain blowing in, and they slipped out together. The restaurant exhaled after they left, conversation slowly picking up again, chairs scraping against the floor. I stayed for a bit, staring at the puddle of wax from the candle I'd been messing with earlier. The waiter asked if I wanted dessert, and I shook my head. He cleared the plates quietly, like he knew anything louder would snap something. When I finally stepped outside, the rain had turned to a drizzle, making the street shine like it had been polished. The bus roared past right as I reached the stop, but I didn't bother running this time. I stood there, jacket damp, thinking about the word recently and how flimsy it really was. Back at my place, I made tea I didn't want, scrolled my phone, and saw nothing from her. Just a spam email about discounted mattresses. The TV flickered in the background, but I couldn't follow the plot. I kept replaying the moment the little kid reached for her hand. It was burned into my brain louder than any apology. The next day, I walked past the restaurant again. I told myself I wanted that flatbread, but I knew it was about going back to the scene. A hostess didn't recognize me. The fern wall looked fake in daylight. I sat at a corner table and ordered the same olives, like maybe I could take back the night by chewing through it again. The pits still felt sharp, like they wanted to remind me where I'd been. I watched couples come in, coworkers split appetizers, strangers scrolling on their phones. Normal. All of them wrapped up in their own quiet dramas I'd never know. I sat there until the sun shifted and the lights flickered on. Then I paid, left a tip that was probably too much, and walked out without looking back. Outside, the air was cool and clean, like the storm had washed off some of the city. I didn't chase the bus when it passed this time either. I walked home a different road, not because I needed to, just because.
Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories.
I sat frozen, hands under the table, thumb digging into the side of my chair. People around us were trying not to stare, but failing. I caught the waiter holding a tray and watching from the corner of his eye, ready to jump in but not sure how. Emma reached for the little kid's hand without even thinking. It wasn't a choice, more like instinct. That's when I knew. Recently single didn't mean what I thought it did. Recently single meant the argument wasn't even finished. The door hadn't even fully closed. She whispered something to him and he nodded. The kid shuffled to the door, waiting like they'd practiced it before. The guy's shoulders slumped, but he didn't push. He just stood there, hoodie damp, trying not to make the scene worse. I felt like a piece of furniture stuck in the booth with half a flatbread and no idea where to look. I wanted to be mad at her, but the whole thing was so raw it didn't fit into simple anger. The pendant light above buzzed softly. The chili oil pooled on the plate. The music switched to some slow track that made the silence even louder. She apologized to me quickly, barely above a whisper. Sorry like dropping a glass and knowing it can't be fixed. She told the waiter to split the bill. I tapped my card without looking, not even noticing how much. My appetite had left the table already. When she stood up, I did too. Because manners are automatic like that. She pulled on her coat, folded her napkin neatly, and walked to the door where the kids were waiting. They leaned into her instantly, like she was gravity, and they were just falling back into place. The guy opened the door, rain blowing in, and they slipped out together. The restaurant exhaled after they left, conversation slowly picking up again, chairs scraping against the floor. I stayed for a bit, staring at the puddle of wax from the candle I'd been messing with earlier. The waiter asked if I wanted dessert, and I shook my head. He cleared the plates quietly, like he knew anything louder would snap something. When I finally stepped outside, the rain had turned to a drizzle, making the street shine like it had been polished. The bus roared past right as I reached the stop, but I didn't bother running this time. I stood there, jacket damp, thinking about the word recently and how flimsy it really was. Back at my place, I made tea I didn't want, scrolled my phone, and saw nothing from her. Just a spam email about discounted mattresses. The TV flickered in the background, but I couldn't follow the plot. I kept replaying the moment the little kid reached for her hand. It was burned into my brain louder than any apology. The next day, I walked past the restaurant again. I told myself I wanted that flatbread, but I knew it was about going back to the scene. A hostess didn't recognize me. The fern wall looked fake in daylight. I sat at a corner table and ordered the same olives, like maybe I could take back the night by chewing through it again. The pits still felt sharp, like they wanted to remind me where I'd been. I watched couples come in, coworkers split appetizers, strangers scrolling on their phones. Normal. All of them wrapped up in their own quiet dramas I'd never know. I sat there until the sun shifted and the lights flickered on. Then I paid, left a tip that was probably too much, and walked out without looking back. Outside, the air was cool and clean, like the storm had washed off some of the city. I didn't chase the bus when it passed this time either. I walked home a different road, not because I needed to, just because. It started on one of those weekends where you wake up late, check your phone, and think you're just gonna burn through the day with random scrolling and leftover pizza. Then Linda messaged me. She wasn't someone I've been talking to for long, just a handful of swipes, and some jokes about how every guy on the app had the same 3 hiking photos. She said, "Hey, want to come over and hang out?" And honestly, I didn't need convincing. I threw on jeans, grabbed my keys, and drove over. Her place was in this block of newer apartments, the kind where everything looks the same gray siding, fake stone at the bottom, balconies with the same 2 chairs and a dead plant. She lived on the 3rd floor, and the whole stairwell smelled like a mix of laundry detergent and someone frying onions. When I knocked, she answered the door with this big grin and a loose bun in her hair like she'd just rolled out of bed, but somehow still looked like she had her life together. Inside, the apartment was half set up. There were boxes against the wall, a TV on the floor instead of a stand, and a stack of plates still wrapped in bubble wrap. She waved me in and said she needed a favor real quick. I figured it was something like opening a jar or moving a chair. Then she pointed to this massive couch shoved up against the wall and said, "Can you help me move this downstairs?" I didn't even hesitate. I thought, okay, maybe she's rearranging or selling it. It was heavier than it looked, one of those couches with a pull-out bed inside, and I could feel my arms straining immediately. She grabbed one side, I took the other, and together we shuffled it through the doorway, down the hall, and toward the stairs. The whole time she kept her phone angled toward us, like she was snapping a video. She laughed when I asked about it and said she was documenting the struggle. I thought nothing of it. People post everything these days. Dragging that couch down 3 flights of stairs was brutal. My hands slipped, my back started aching, and we had to stop halfway because a neighbor carrying groceries stared at us like we were insane. Linda kept filming little clips, giggling about how this is gold. I figured she just wanted to post about how annoying moving furniture is. We finally got it outside, and I thought that was the end of it. I wiped sweat off my forehead and leaned on the railing, trying to catch my breath. That's when she dropped the second part. She said we had to take it down the block to another building. My head spun a little. I asked why, and she just said, "Trust me, it's funny." So we hauled that beast of a couch half a block, through the parking lot, and over to a different building that looked exactly like hers. I was sweating through my shirt, my arms shaking, but she kept urging me on, laughing the whole way. When we got to the door, she dug around for keys, pulled out a set, and opened it like she'd done it 100 times. The apartment we walked into was weird. It was already furnished, but kind of stripped down like someone had just moved out. The walls were bare and there were no personal touches. No photos, no clutter, just empty shelves and a faint smell of fresh paint. We wrestled the couch inside, shoved it against the wall, and I finally asked what the hell we were doing. I swear, the first time I met Amy, it felt like I was being welcomed into a commercial. She had that kind of energy, too polished, too bright, like she practiced her smile in the mirror until it stuck. We met at this smoothie bar that smelled like fruit rotting in sugar, and she walked in wearing a blazer even though it was Saturday afternoon. I thought maybe she'd just come from work or some conference, but she explained she dressed for success every day. At the time, I laughed, thinking it was just a quirky line. She was talkative, nonstop, in fact. The kind of talk where she'd ask me something, but before I could answer, she was already telling a story about her own answer. Normally, that would have put me off, but she had this charm that made it feel like she believed every word she was saying was important, and maybe it was. She talked about meditation, journaling, doing cold showers to reset her nervous system, and her commitment to what she called the grind of self-growth. I thought it was harmless. People had their quirks, and at least she wasn't ranting about crypto or conspiracy theories. We went on a second date, this time for a walk by the river, and she brought me a little notebook as a gift. She said it was for writing down affirmations. I'm not the type to do that stuff, but I took it politely, scribbled a few things like don't forget to do laundry and buy toothpaste just to make it look used. By the third date, though, things shifted. We were at her apartment, a small but tidy place with motivational posters on the walls. Stuff like hustle harder and your vibe attracts your tribe. Even her fridge had sticky notes with goals written on them. I sat down on the couch, and she came over with a stack of papers clipped neatly together. She didn't even build up to it. She just handed them to me like we were at a job interview. It was a contract. Not for a gym, not for therapy, not for anything normal. It was to join her team in some kind of LM. I don't even remember the exact name of the company, something vague that could have been about vitamins, skincare, or selling kitchen gadgets. All I know is the pages talked about residual income, team leadership, and unlocking your financial destiny. She wanted me to sign as her accountability partner. I thought she was joking at first. I laughed, waiting for her to laugh too. She didn't. She looked serious, her eyes wide, nodding like she was presenting me with a golden opportunity. She started talking faster, explaining how she'd already recruited 5 people, how she was on the verge of hitting a new tier, and how having me on her team would push her over the line. She even pulled out her phone and showed me charts, colored graphs with arrows going up, photos of people at big events wearing matching shirts, captions like, "This could be you." It was like she'd been waiting for the right moment to pitch me, and the first 2 dates were just warm-ups. I told her I wasn't interested, but she didn't back down. She leaned in, lowered her voice like she was letting me in on a secret, and told me how most people quit before they see results, but she knew I had the discipline to succeed. The way she said it almost sounded like flirting, but there was nothing romantic about it. It was all business. I flipped through the contract just to humor her. There were fees listed, like $199 up front for a starter kit, then monthly charges for tools and resources. She glossed over that part quickly, saying it was an investment in myself. I asked her if she'd actually made money, and she dodged, saying she was laying the foundation. The whole vibe of the night flipped. I wasn't sitting across from someone I was dating anymore. I was sitting across from a recruiter. And the worst part was, she kept weaving personal compliments into the pitch, like telling me I was naturally charismatic and a born leader. It was manipulative, like she thought she could flatter me into signing away my time and money. When I kept refusing, she sighed and tried a different angle. She said, "Well, even if you don't want to sell, you could still buy some of the products through me." She opened a cabinet in her kitchen and showed me shelves stacked with boxes, protein powders, supplements, some kind of skincare line, even essential oils. It looked like a warehouse crammed into her apartment. I realized then that she wasn't just in this casually. She was drowning in it. Every corner of her life was covered in it. The posters, the notebooks, the sticky notes, the constant self-growth talk. It was all feeding into this one obsession. I left not long after. She gave me the contract to look over, but I tossed it in a recycling bin on my way home. Over the next week, she messaged me constantly. Not asking how I was doing, not about grabbing food or seeing a movie, just sending me videos, testimonials, and reminders that this opportunity won't wait forever. Eventually, I stopped replying. She sent one last message, a long paragraph about how disappointed she was, how I clearly wasn't ready to take charge of my future, and how she hoped I'd find success in my own way. It read less like a breakup and more like a sales email. Months later, I stumbled across one of her TikToks. She was standing in front of a whiteboard, talking about building your empire, tagging it with hashtags about boss life and hustle culture. She didn't even look like the same person I first met. The smile wasn't casual anymore. It was rehearsed, almost stiff. Whenever people bring up MLMs now, I don't even think about the scam part first. I think about that night in her apartment, sitting on her couch with a contract in my lap, realizing I wasn't on a date at all. I was just another lead on her list. I always figured people who put their dogs front and center on dating apps were just trying to cheat the system. Like, instead of showing personality, they just bank on puppy eyes doing the work. But Dilwood's profile got me anyway. Every picture had this golden retriever in it, and not just random shots either, like actual calendar-worthy stuff. One photo had the dog with its tongue lolling out while wearing sunglasses. Another had him sitting in a pile of orange leaves like a fall ad. And there was even a slow-motion video of him running through a field. I thought, alright, maybe this guy really is a dog person. And honestly, people with dogs usually come off more responsible, so I swiped right. When we started talking, everything circled back to the dog. DeWood said his retriever loved peanut butter, hated bats, and had this goofy habit of trying to sit on people's laps even though he was way too big. He painted such vivid pictures I could imagine the dog bounding around the room while we texted. He sent me photo after photo, always with a little caption like, "He looks guilty here because he stole my sock," or "This is his favorite hiking spot." It all felt believable, like he was sharing his everyday life. Our first date was at a coffee shop. He was already sitting outside when I got there, sipping an iced latte. No dog, which I figured was fine. It was hot out, and maybe he didn't want to leave the poor guy tied up somewhere. Dilwood had this shy but friendly energy, and he wasn't bad looking either. We talked for over an hour, and of course the dog came up. He pulled out his phone mid-conversation to show me more pictures, scrolling through what looked like an endless folder. The golden retriever on a hammock, the retriever in a party hat, the retriever balancing a treat on his nose. I thought, damn, this guy is obsessed. By the second date, I expected to meet the dog. We went for a walk in the park, and I even wore sneakers, imagining the retriever dragging me along while Dilwood laughed. But he showed up alone. I asked, and he said the dog was staying at a friend's place for the weekend. Okay, fine. Stuff happens. The third date, same thing. This time, he said the dog was at the groomer. The fourth, he claimed the retriever had eaten something weird and was at the vet. By then, I was side-eyeing the whole situation. Nobody who calls themselves a dog dad spends that much time away from their supposed pride and joy. I let it slide, but the red flag was waving pretty hard. One night, we were at his place watching a movie. Halfway through, he fell asleep on the couch, head tilted back, soft snoring. His phone was right there on the coffee table, screen lighting up with notifications. I didn't mean to snoop, but curiosity got me. I opened his Instagram and started scrolling. That's when I noticed the captions on the dog photos didn't match the way Dilwood talked. They were way too polished, written like brand slogans. Stuff like "golden hour with my golden boy" and hashtags stacked a mile long. Hashtag dogs of Instagram, hashtag golden retriever love, hashtag puppalife. It didn't sound like him. I clicked one of the hashtags, scrolled a little, and froze. There it was, the exact same picture he'd shown me earlier. Same golden retriever, same sunglasses, same hammock. Except the account wasn't his. It belonged to a pet influencer page with hundreds of thousands of followers. My stomach dropped. I kept digging. The pumpkin patch photo. There. The slow motion running video. There. Even the birthday hat picture with crumbs on his nose. All from that influencer account. Every single image Dilwood had sent me was stolen. He hadn't just lied about owning a dog. He'd built his whole identity around someone else's. When he woke up, I confronted him. My voice came out sharper than I expected, the words tumbling out before I could soften them. He didn't even bother denying it. He rubbed his eyes, sat up, and said, "I just wanted you to like me." Like that was supposed to clear it all up. Like pretending to own a dog was the same as exaggerating your height or lying about your favorite band. I couldn't believe it. All those stories about quirks, all the supposed adventures, they were just lines he'd made up. He'd taken a stranger's pet and pasted it into his own life, hoping it would make him more appealing. I didn't know if I wanted to laugh at how absurd it was or scream at how manipulative it felt. I didn't storm out that night. I sat there for a while, staring at the blank TV screen, listening to the hum of his fridge. He tried to explain more, saying he thought people wouldn't give him a chance without something extra. That everyone loves dogs, and he just wanted to fit that mold. But the more he talked, the hollower it sounded. After that night, things fizzled. I couldn't look at him without picturing that golden retriever with his perfect, influencer-ready grin. I ignored his texts until they stopped coming. Weeks later, I was scrolling and stumbled across the influencer page again. The retriever was in a new video, this time chasing bubbles in a backyard. He looked as goofy and lovable as ever, but I couldn't enjoy it. All I saw was the woods lie layered on top, the way he used those photos to make me believe something that never existed. It made me think about how fragile trust is when you meet someone online. You're already filling in the blanks with what they show you. It doesn't take much for them to hand you a script instead of the truth. I wasn't just disappointed. I felt duped, like an unpaid audience member clapping for a play that turned out to be a scam. I still swipe sometimes, but whenever I see a profile that's wall-to-wall dog pictures, I don't hesitate. Left. Not because I hate dogs, but because I can't shake the memory of Dolwood's voice, quiet and almost pleading, saying, "I just want you to like me." I should have trusted my gut the second Brody pulled up outside my place. It was one of those nights where the air felt sticky, like the weather couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or not, and I was already in a mood before he even arrived. Then this sleek black car slid to a stop in front of me. Not just nice, expensive. The kind of car that usually sits parked outside a hotel with a valid standing guard. Brody leaned across the passenger seat and popped the door open with his cocky grin like he'd been waiting to see my reaction. I tried to play it cool, but I'll admit climbing into buttery leather seats made me feel out of my league. The whole interior smelled brand new, not a single scratch or crumb in sight. My car, on the other hand, smells like spilled fries and has a crack in the dashboard from the summer heat. So yeah, I was impressed. He noticed too. He smirked and said something vague like connections pay off. I asked if it was his, and he just gave me this shrug like, obviously. I let it go, though the answer didn't sit right. The drive downtown was smooth, like we were gliding instead of rolling on pavement. Brody kept his hand resting casual on the wheel, tapping along to the music, clearly enjoying the image he was projecting. I tried not to stare at the glowing dashboard, but the car felt like part of the date itself. I was supposed to think he was successful, put together, a guy who had his life sorted. He took me to this rooftop bar I'd only ever seen on Instagram, the type of place where cocktails cost $18 and everyone is either posing for photos or pretending not to notice the skyline view. He slid right through the crowd like he belonged there, ordered 2 drinks without asking me what I wanted, and dropped a crisp bill on the bar like it was nothing. For a while, I let myself get pulled into the performance. The lights, the buzz, his confidence, it worked. We found a spot near the edge where you could see the city glowing below. I sipped my drink and listened to him talk about how he hated ordinary weekends. He told me about wild road trips, spur-of-the-moment flights, nights that ended with sunrises. He made it sound like his whole life was one big highlight reel. But in between the stories, he kept glancing at his phone. He'd flip it face down, then flip it back, tapping the screen like he was waiting for something urgent. It wasn't subtle. I asked if everything was okay, and he just smiled and said, "Yeah, work stuff." About an hour in, the mood shifted. 2 cops walked into the bar. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Maybe they were off duty grabbing a drink. But then Brody went stiff. His jaw clenched. His hand froze on his glass. He kept his eyes down, but his shoulders were practically buzzing with tension. The taller cop scanned the room, spotted him instantly, and pointed. They started walking straight toward us. The crowd quieted, not completely, but enough that you could feel a ripple of attention. People love watching drama when it isn't theirs. The cop stopped at our table and asked Brody to step outside. He tried to brush it off, forcing a laugh, asking what this was about, but his voice cracked just enough to give him away. They repeated themselves, firmer this time. His chair scraped against the floor as he stood, the sound sharp enough to make me flinch. I followed, partly out of confusion, partly out of not wanting to sit alone while everyone whispered. Outside, under the neon glow of the bar's sign, the truth came out. The car, the expensive ride he'd shown up in, wasn't his. It belonged to his boss. He was supposed to be at work that night, but instead he'd taken it for what he called a quick date. His boss had reported it missing. I swear, my stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. All that confidence, all those stories about living big, it was built on a lie. He wasn't the guy with the luxury car. He was the guy who borrowed it behind his boss's back. He kept trying to spin it, telling the cops it was a misunderstanding, that he planned to return it, that his boss was overreacting. But the more he talked, the worse it sounded. The cops weren't buying a word of it. They told him to stay put while they sorted it out. I stood there, arms crossed, feeling like I'd accidentally walked into a reality show prank. People leaving the bar slowed down to watch, some of them pulling out their phones to record. I caught my reflection in the car's glossy paint, me standing there awkwardly while the guy I was supposed to be on a date with was being accused of stealing. My face burned, not from embarrassment exactly, but from how unreal it all felt. Brody tried to catch my eye, maybe hoping I'd back him up. I didn't. I just said I was leaving. He called after me, but the cops made him stay. I walked down the block, my shoes clicking on the pavement, trying to process how quickly the night had flipped. When I got home, there was already a message from him. He said it was handled and that it wasn't a big deal. He wanted to explain to meet again. I didn't respond. What was there to say? He built the whole night on an image that wasn't real. For days, I kept replaying that moment when the cops walked in, the way his body stiffened like he'd been waiting for it. That told me everything. He knew it was only a matter of time. He just thought maybe he'd get away with it long enough to impress me. Now whenever I see a luxury car glide down the street, I don't picture wealth or success. I picture Brody grinning behind the wheel of something that wasn't his, trying to make me believe in a version of him that only existed for as long as he could hold on to those keys. The invite came through so casually it barely registered. Lindsay just said, "Hey, want to come with me to my friend's party this weekend?" And I thought nothing of it. People throw parties all the time, house parties, birthday parties, random get-togethers where no one actually knows why they're there. I figured I'd get some free food, maybe meet a few new people, and if it was boring, I'd sneak out early. No big deal. She picked me up Saturday afternoon in this dented little hatchback with a missing hubcap and a collection of empty coffee cups rattling in the back seat. She was buzzing with energy, tapping the steering wheel, talking nonstop about how this party is going to be different. I didn't know what she meant, but I nodded along, half listening while staring out the window. We drove out of the city, past strip malls and gas stations, into more rural-looking roads. The kind where streetlights thin out and the trees crowd closer. It took longer than I expected, almost an hour. By then, I asked once where exactly this was, and she said, "You'll see, it's worth it." That should have been my first clue. We finally pulled into a gravel driveway where a big house stood at the end. Not a mansion, but definitely one of those modern renovated homes you see in real estate ads, complete with string lights on the porch and a banner hanging over the door that said, "Awaken your power." My stomach sank a little. That didn't sound like any normal party. Inside, it wasn't balloons and music like I expected. It was rows of folding chairs in the living room, people already seated, and a table in the corner stacked with glossy pamphlets. At the front stood a guy with slicked back hair, pacing the headset mic like he was about to deliver a TED Talk. Everyone turned and looked at me as Lindsay guided me in, and I instantly felt like I'd walked into the wrong classroom. Lindsay smiled too wide, whispered, "Just trust me," and sat us down. The guy with the mic started talking about energy and alignment and breaking free of average thinking. People clapped and nodded at each other little affirmations like they were in on some secret I hadn't been told. My pulse started hammering. This wasn't a party. This was something else entirely. The longer it went, the clearer it became. It wasn't a self-help talk. It wasn't therapy. It was some sort of singles retreat, except not the fun kind where people mingle awkwardly over cheap wine. No, this was structured. They talked about pairing exercises, about building attraction through power dynamics, and about unlocking dominance in relationships. The words made my skin crawl. I leaned toward Lindsay and whispered that I didn't sign up for this. She just patted my knee like I was overreacting. She said I should give it a chance. But the doors were shut behind us, and when I stood to maybe slip out, one of the organizers politely but firmly asked me to hold questions until after the session. My chest tightened. I wasn't being asked to stay. I was being told. The guy with the mic launched into stories about how he used to be invisible until he learned the rules of manipulation. He called it empowerment, but every sentence sounded more like a trick for control. People around me nodded, scribbled notes, even repeated his phrases like chants. Lindsay was right there with him, eyes shining, jotting everything down in her little notebook. I realized then this wasn't her friend's party. This was her thing. She hadn't just dragged me along. She had trapped me in her world, a world where she was a teacher, and I was her perfect example. The group split into exercises. We had to pair off and do eye contact drills where you stare at someone without speaking, then switch to mirroring exercises where you mimic the other person's movements. I went along at first mostly because I didn't want to cause a scene, but it felt wrong. Every activity was framed like flirting practice, but it wasn't fun or spontaneous. It was rehearsed, mechanical, like acting out a script. Lindsay kept nudging me, whispering things like, "See how powerful this is." I wanted to shout at her, ask why she thought this was okay, but I bit my tongue. She looked so wrapped up in it, so convinced she was doing something meaningful, that it almost scared me more than the seminar itself. By the time we got to the closing ceremony, I was exhausted. The guy with the mic told everyone to close their eyes, picture the person they wanted to attract, and imagine holding power over them. My palms were sweaty, my jaw tight. I opened my eyes early and saw Lindsay watching me, her face lit with this eerie kind of pride, like I was part of her experiment. When it ended, I tried to head straight for the door, but she grabbed my arm. She asked what I thought, and I couldn't even form words. I muttered something about needing air and stepped outside. The night was cooler than I expected, crickets buzzing in the grass, the string lights above glowing warm. But instead of relief, all I felt was trapped. She followed me out eventually, smiling like she'd just shown me the greatest secret of my life. I didn't smile back. I told her flat out I wasn't interested in whatever that was, that I thought I was coming to a normal party, not some workshop about manipulation. Her face fell for a second, but then she said something that chilled me. "Don't worry, you'll understand after a few more sessions." That was the last straw. I walked down the gravel driveway to the road and ordered a rideshare, even though it cost me $48 to get back home. I sat in the back seat, staring out the window while my phone buzzed with her messages. She kept asking if I was okay, if I wanted to debrief about what we learned, if I considered coming back next weekend. I didn't answer. When I finally got home, I shut the door, kicked off my shoes, and sat in the quiet. My ears still rang with the chants, the scripted phrases, the fake confidence. I thought about how easily I'd walked into it, all because she'd said the word party. And I thought of the way her eyes had glowed when she looked at me, like I wasn't a date at all. I was just another recruit, another pawn in her retreat. The weirdest part about Kevin was how normal he seemed at first. Like painfully normal. No flashy car, no over-the-top energy. Not even that fake "I'm too busy but I'll squeeze you in" vibe some guys push. He showed up to our first date on foot, wearing jeans and a plain hoodie, carrying himself like he had nowhere else to be. We went to this small diner with sticky booths and a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked since before I was born. He ordered pancakes even though it was 7 p.m. and told me he liked simple stuff. I remember thinking, finally, someone low-key. That first date was easy. We talked about music, family, dumb childhood stories. He didn't check his phone once, which I thought was a rare green flag. He laughed at my jokes in a way that didn't feel forced. When we left, he walked me halfway home, no weird moves, just a wave and "see you soon." It felt safe. The second date, same deal. A dive bar this time, dark lighting, pool tables, cheap beer. He wasn't trying too hard, wasn't bragging, just steady. We stayed until closing, and I went home thinking he was probably the most grounded guy I'd met in months. The third date was when everything cracked. It started random. A coworker sent me a link one morning with no context, just a laughing emoji. I clicked it, and there was Kevin on YouTube. Not some old video, not a random clip, an entire channel. His face, his voice, his hoodie from that first date. The title, Social Experiment. First date with a stranger. I couldn't breathe for a second. The video was us. Our first date. The same diner, the pancakes, me laughing at something dumb he said. Only it wasn't just raw footage. He'd edited it, added cheesy background music, and little text bubbles popping up with commentary like, "She's definitely into me here," or "Notice how I control the pace of the convo." My chest burned. I scrolled through the channel and found more. Dozens of videos. All first dates with different women. All filmed without them knowing. Titles like "Making Her Pay for Half," "Social Experiment," or acting disinterested to test reactions. Some had thousands of views. The comments were filled with people debating whether the women passed the test or not. My stomach twisted. I clicked back to our video and forced myself to watch. Every laugh of mine was clipped and looped. Every glance turned into a joke. He even froze the frame once to zoom in on me sipping water, with a caption that said, "Classic sign of nerves." I wanted to slam the laptop shut, but I couldn't look away. He wasn't just sharing the date, he was narrating me like I was a lab rat. That night we had plans. I showed up, shaking but determined to see how he'd act now that I knew. He was already at the bar, grinning like always, waving me over. I sat down, heart pounding, and stared at him for a good 10 seconds before asking straight up, "Do you film your dates?" For a split second, his grin faltered. Then he chuckled, leaned back, and said, "So he found it, like it was no big deal." Like I'd stumbled across his side hustle selling sneakers, not an entire YouTube empire built on violating trust. He tried to spin it, saying it was just content, that nobody gets hurt, that it was all anonymous. But it wasn't anonymous. My face was there. My laugh. My name had been in the video description until he blurred it later. I asked why. He shrugged and said, "People eat this stuff up, and I like making content." And he added, almost proudly, that his channel was close to being monetized, that he'd probably start making real money soon. I sat there stunned, drink untouched, every word of his feeling like a slap. I thought back to that first date, the way I relaxed, the way I told him stories I never tell strangers. I'd let my guard down because I thought he was different. Meanwhile, he had a camera hidden somewhere, capturing it all, turning me into a punchline for strangers to dissect. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I just stood up and said I was leaving. He didn't chase me, didn't apologize. He just stayed there, probably already thinking about how he could spin this moment into another experiment. When I got home, I sat in the dark, laptop open, watching the comments on our video. People debating whether I was girlfriend material, random usernames rating my laugh, strangers giving Kevin props for holding frame. It felt surreal, like my private evening had been stolen and shoved onto a stage without me knowing. I reported the video, I flagged the channel. Nothing happened. It stayed up, gaining views, comments multiplying. Every notification on his page felt like a reminder of how stupid I'd been. For weeks, I kept checking, even though I knew it would just make me sick. Eventually, the video disappeared, not because of me, but because he replaced it with newer ones. More women, more first dates, more commentary. He never slowed down. Sometimes I wonder how many other people left those dates feeling what I felt. Violated, tricked, small. I wonder if they ever found out, or if they still think Kevin was just some ordinary guy with a hoodie and a smile. Whenever someone now describes themselves as a content creator, my stomach knots. I picture Kevin's smug grin, his fake grounded energy, and that stupid caption about me sipping water. And I remember how normal he seemed, how easy it was to trust him, until I read the truth in full HD. You ever get that gut feeling something is off, but you can't quite explain why? That was me with Megan. Not right away, though. At first, she was great, funny, sharp, always had a story that made me laugh. She was the kind of person who could make standing in line for coffee feel like an adventure. We clicked fast, faster than I usually do with anyone. Our first couple of dates were pretty standard. Drinks one night, tacos another, then a movie at my place. Nothing wild, nothing sketchy. She was curious, always asking about my routines, where I worked out, which coffee shop I liked, what time I usually woke up. I figured she was just interested in me. People want to know those things when they're into you, right? It wasn't until she came over to my apartment that things started getting weird. She brought this little gadget with her, said she used it for work. Some USB-looking thing with a flashing light. She plugged it into my charger block for a while, said she needed to juice it up. I didn't think anything of it. She was tech-y, always fiddling with gadgets, so I shrugged it off. That night was normal pizza, some dumb comedy, her falling asleep half on top of me. The USB thing sat forgotten on my desk, blinking quietly. When she left in the morning, she forgot it. I texted her about it, and she said, "Oh, just keep it safe. I'll grab it next time." I tossed it in a drawer and went on my day. Then little things started happening. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. A buddy texted me asking if I was okay after I'd supposedly sent him a message about being sick, except I hadn't. My mom replied to a text I never wrote. And one night, I opened my phone to find a conversation with Megan I swear I didn't have. Messages sent from me that I didn't remember typing. I chalked it up to being tired, maybe drunk texting without remembering, but it kept happening. People told me I'd said things I hadn't. Even my bank app gave me an alert about a login for my own device, except at a time I wasn't even holding my phone. I started digging. I Googled the device she left behind, cross-checking the design and blinking lights. My stomach sank when I found forum posts talking about SIM card cloning devices. They could copy the information from your SIM card and basically let someone else receive your texts, send messages as you, even track calls. My drawer wasn't holding some random gadget. It was holding the reason my life suddenly felt hijacked. I confronted her the next time we met. I expected her to deny it to play dumb. But she didn't. She looked me dead in the eye, half smiling, and admitted it. Said she cloned my SIM card. Said she thought it was cute to reply as me sometimes, just to see how people would react. Like it was a harmless prank. My whole body went cold. This wasn't a prank. It was my entire life being puppeted without me knowing. She'd been inside my conversations, my private moments, playing me like a character in her own story. I told her it was messed up, that it was beyond crossing a line. She shrugged, said I was overreacting, that I should be flattered she wanted to be that connected to me. Flattered? That word burned into my head. After she left, I tore my apartment apart looking for anything else she might have planted. I switched phones, called my provider, explained the situation in the most awkward way possible. The rep on the line didn't even sound surprised, just walked me through resetting everything, new SIM, new passwords. It cost me $35, but I would have paid 10 times that just to feel like I was back in control. Even after I thought I'd fixed it, the paranoia didn't fade. I second-guessed every message I sent, every weird typo in a reply I got. Was it them, or was it her still lurking in some system I hadn't closed off yet? I started using two-step authentication for everything, deleting apps I didn't trust, turning my phone off at night just so I could sleep without imagining her ghost texting my contacts. The worst part, I'd read some of the conversations she'd hijacked. She wasn't just sending harmless stuff. She was testing my friends, prodding them, asking questions I never would. She even tried replying to my sister once, pretending to be me, weaving little lies into our family chat. Seeing her words under my name made my skin crawl. I cut her off after that. Blocked her number, blocked her on socials, told mutual friends not to give her updates about me. But she still slipped through. Weeks later, one of my friends showed me a screenshot. Megan had messaged him pretending to be me again, asking about plans, fishing for details. Luckily, he noticed something was off and called me directly. That's what hit me. She wasn't just a bad date. She was someone who wanted control. Not love, not connection. Control. Using tech, using charm, using anything she could to crawl into the cracks of my life and wedge herself there. It took months before I felt normal again. Even now, I'll glance at my phone and wonder if the message I just sent is really mine, or if somewhere out there, Megan's still trying to wear my name like a mask. Whenever people joke about clingy dates or laugh about someone texting too much, I think back to her. Not just clingy, she literally cloned me. I met Chris in the most boring way possible, at a bank. Not even a dramatic bank moment like a robbery or someone freaking out about overdraft fees. No, it was just me sitting there, filling out paperwork about a new account I didn't even want, but felt pressured into signing up for. He was the one walking me through it. He had that clean-cut look, hair gelled just right, tie knotted perfectly, shirt crisp like it had never touched a human dryer. He wasn't my type, but he was charming. Funny in a dry way, slipping little jokes between the boring financial jargon like, don't worry, I won't make you memorize routing numbers. It made a dull errand weirdly enjoyable. When we wrapped up, he handed me his card with a smile that lasted a beat too long. At first, I thought it was just professional part of the job. But later that night, I got a message from him on a dating app. I hadn't given him my profile, so he must have searched me out, which should have been a red flag. Instead, I laughed it off and agreed to meet. Our first date was casual, a diner near the office where I'd met him. He told me he was between jobs now. I assumed he meant he was looking for something better, that he quit the bank because he wanted out of that stiff corporate vibe. He kept it vague, just saying he wanted more freedom. We clicked though. He was easy to talk to, surprising me with how much he knew about random topics, like the history of sneakers or weird facts about bridges. He made eye contact, listened closely, and gave off the vibe of someone who genuinely wanted to be there. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would turn into something real. Second date, we went bowling. He wasn't great at it, but he played it up for laughs, sliding down the lane once on purpose to make me laugh. He told me again how glad he was to have moved on from his old job. He said it like a weight off his shoulders, and I figured good for him. Everyone deserves to leave a job they hate. But the third date, that's when the truth slipped out. We were at this small bar, neon lights buzzing, sticky tables that clung to your arms if you rested them too long. He had a couple of drinks, loosened up more than usual, and out of nowhere he said, I actually quit my job because I wasn't allowed to date clients. He said it like a confession, casual but heavy. It took me a second to process. He did my banker. I had been his client. He wasn't between jobs. He quit because of me. My brain scrambled. On one hand, part of me felt flattered, like, wow, he gave up his job just to pursue this. But on the other hand, it made my stomach twist. Who does that? Who risks their stability, their paycheck, their career path just to go after a stranger they barely know? I asked if he was serious, and he nodded, sipping his drink like it was no big deal. He said he'd been thinking about leaving anyway, that the bank job was a dead end, that I was just the push he needed, but I couldn't shake the thought, what if I hadn't matched with him? Would he still have left, or was I just the excuse he needed? As the night went on, he kept circling back to it. How he read over and over the rules about client relationships. How he decided it was worth breaking them. How he couldn't stop thinking about me after that first meeting. At first it sounded romantic, like a movie plot, but the longer he talked, the more it felt obsessive. After that, our date started to feel loaded. He wanted to see me constantly, texting nonstop, suggesting plans for every night of the week. I pulled back, making excuses about work, about being busy, just to give myself space. That's when he started dropping comments about how he'd already sacrificed so much for me, how he'd taken a leap and hoped I'd meet him halfway. It wasn't just pressure, it was guilt. Like I owed him something for a choice I never asked him to make. The tipping point came one afternoon when he showed up outside my office unannounced. He said he was in the neighborhood, but the way he lingered waiting for me to finish didn't feel casual. He walked me to the subway, talking about how he was looking at new jobs, but nothing felt right, because he wanted to keep his schedule open for us. That's when I realized he wasn't building a life, he was orbiting mine. I didn't end it right away. Part of me hoped he'd chill out, get a new job, balance himself again. But he didn't. Every conversation looped back to me being the reason he left, how I was the turning point, how fate had lined it up. The word fate made me want to crawl out of my skin. Eventually, I told him I couldn't keep seeing him. I tried to be gentle, saying I wasn't ready for the intensity. I thought he needed time to figure out his next steps. He looked crushed, but he didn't argue. He just nodded, said he understood, and walked away. A week later, I got a letter in the mail, an actual handwritten letter. He thanked me for changing his life, said he didn't regret quitting, said he hoped I'd remember him as a guy who chose love over everything else. It should have felt sweet, but it just felt heavy, like a weight I didn't want. I don't know where Chris ended up. Maybe he found another job. Maybe he's telling someone else the same story about how he once quit for love. All I know is, every time I walk into a bank now, I can't help wondering about the people behind the desks, and if any of them are watching customers and thinking about crossing that same line. I never thought much about Olivia when we first matched. Her profile was short, not one of those mile-long bios full of quotes or bucket lists. Just a couple of photos. Her at a museum, her holding a coffee, her on a rooftop with the city behind her. No dog pics, no gym selfies, nothing trying too hard. I like that. Our first date was at a little bookstore cafe downtown. She was already there when I walked in, sitting with a cup of tea and flipping through some giant art book that looked heavy enough to knock someone out. She looked up, smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was auditioning. She had this calm presence, like she actually wanted to hear whatever I was about to say. We talked for hours. Books, music, random stuff about childhood. She said she liked honest people, that she didn't have time for games. I remember nodding, thinking finally someone straightforward. By the time we left, the cafe lights were dimming, and the staff was wiping down tables around us. The second date was even better. We walked around a photography exhibit, pointing out which pieces made sense and which ones looked like they belonged in someone's recycling bin. She had opinions, strong ones, but she listened to mine too. She carried herself like someone who'd been to 100 of these things, but still found joy in them. By the third date, I was hooked. We met at a wine bar, the kind with candles dripping out of bottles and staff who explain the menu like it's a sacred text. She was in a good mood, laughing more than usual, her cheeks pink from the wine. Then, somewhere between our second and third glass, she dropped it. She told me she was working on a project, an exhibit. I thought cool, that made sense. She was always talking about art. But then she explained. She'd been taking photos of every guy she matched with on dating apps. Not selfies together, not posed pictures. Handed shots. First meetings, walks, sitting across from her at a table. She had a whole series, she said, digital male vulnerability. I laughed at first because I thought she was messing with me, but she wasn't. She leaned back, eyes glowing, and said she already had over 50 photos. Some blown up on canvas, some edited into collages. And the kicker? She wanted me to come to the opening. My chest tightened. I tried to play it cool, asking what exactly the photos showed. She said it was the in-between moments. Guys checking their phones, stirring coffee, fidgeting with menus. She wanted to capture the rawness of modern dating, the uncertainty men show when they think they're not being watched. I sat there stunned, trying to remember every time we'd met. Did she sneak pictures of me at the bookstore? At the museum? Had she been framing me through her phone while I rambled about my favorite author? Suddenly, every smile, every glance downward, every nervous hand movement felt exposed. I asked if she had photos of me already. She grinned and said, of course. The room tilted for a second. My mind raced with questions. How many? Which ones? Where were they now? Hanging in her apartment, already printed and waiting to be displayed. I didn't know whether to feel angry or flattered or just plain creeped out. She kept talking, describing how she wanted the exhibit to feel. Dimly lit rooms, large prints, people walking through and seeing the quiet moments of men trying to connect. She said the project was about honesty, pulling back the curtain. I wanted to tell her it felt more like betrayal, but my throat was dry and the words stuck. The night ended awkwardly. She kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong, while my brain replayed every second of our time together, imagining strangers staring at frozen versions of me on a gallery wall. The following week, curiosity ate at me. I looked up her name online, scrolling through galleries and local art listings. Sure enough, her name popped up on a flyer for an upcoming show. The title is exactly what she'd said. Digital Male Vulnerability. The description promised an exploration of modern masculinity through candid photography. I didn't go, I couldn't. A friend of mine did, not knowing she was connected to me. He texted me photos from inside. My stomach flipped when I saw it, giant prints of men hunched over drinks, laughing nervously, glancing away mid-conversation. And there, near the center of one wall, was me. My side profile, hand resting on a mug, mouth half open like I'd just been caught mid-thought. Blown up 6 feet tall for strangers to study. I stared at the photo for a long time, hating it and recognizing it all at once. It wasn't a flattering shot. It wasn't meant to be. It was me, stripped down to a moment I didn't know was being preserved. After that, I stopped answering her texts. She sent a couple, then stopped too. Maybe she knew I'd seen the exhibit. Maybe she didn't care. Weeks later, I walked past the gallery by accident. The windows were covered in posters, her name plastered across them. A group of people stood outside smoking, talking about the honesty of the work. I kept walking. I wonder if anyone recognized me. If someone stood there staring at my picture, building a whole story in their head about who I was. To them, I wasn't me. I was just part of Olivia's project, another example in her collection of vulnerable men. When I first started seeing Enam, I thought he was one of those laid-back types who just went with the flow. He had a calm voice, never rushed when he spoke, and he always asked questions about me like he was genuinely interested. That was the part that hooked me in. He listened. On our first date, he sat there across the table at this noodle place, nodding as I talked about my family, my work, even dumb stuff like my favorite cereal. Most people glaze over when you go into that kind of detail, but not him. He leaned forward, asked follow-up questions like he really wanted to know. We only went out a couple more times before things started getting strange. At first, it was little stuff. I tell him I usually hit the gym around 7 p.m., and then a few days later, guess who I saw at the gym? And I'm standing there on the treadmill, waving at me like it was some fun surprise. I brushed it off, thinking maybe he just joined the same place by coincidence. Then I mentioned my favorite coffee spot. Just a throwaway line, not even an invite. A week later, I walked in to grab my usual latte, and there he was already sitting at a corner table with his laptop. He smiled, waved me over, acted like it was fate. I laughed it off, though my stomach felt tight. After that, it snowballed. Every detail I gave him, he seemed to use. I told him about this small bookstore I liked, and 2 days later, I walked in and caught him browsing the shelves. I said once that my sister was having a baby soon, and somehow he showed up at her baby shower. That one chilled me. I hadn't invited him, hadn't even given him the date or address. Yet he was there, chatting at my relatives like he belonged. I pulled him aside, trying to stay calm, and asked how he knew about it. He smiled, shrugged, and said he heard me mention it. But I hadn't. Not the exact details. I hadn't told him the time, the place, nothing. He acted like I was overreacting, like it was all just good timing. But my chest tightened because I knew there was no way it was coincidence anymore. That night, I read back through our conversations in my head. All the times he'd asked about my routines, my habits, my family. He hadn't just been curious, he'd been collecting. Every little piece of information was fuel for him to show up where I was, to blur the line between coincidence and control. The more I thought about it, the creepier it felt. I remembered how on our second date, he asked where I usually grocery shopped. It seemed like a harmless question then, but 2 weeks later, he bumped into me in the produce aisle. I remembered how he'd asked what my usual route to work was, and suddenly he was always passing by when I walked out of the subway. I started changing up my schedule just to test it. I went to a different coffee shop, one I never mentioned. He wasn't there. For a second, I felt relief. But the next week, I went back to my usual place. And there he was again, smiling with that same calm expression, waving me over like nothing was wrong. I stopped answering his texts as much. He noticed. He started sending more little check-ins every hour. How's your day? Where you at? Everything okay? Each one made my stomach twist tighter. I wanted to believe he was just interested, but it was too much. The final straw came one night when I got home late. I was unlocking my apartment door, tired, ready to collapse, when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. I turned, and there he was, standing in the hallway, holding a coffee cup like it was the most normal thing in the world. My heart jumped so hard I almost dropped my keys. He said he'd been in the area and thought he'd stop by. But I never gave him my address. Never once. Seeing him standing there, so casual, so calm, made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't even effort at that point. It was obsession. I told him he needed to leave. My voice shook, but I held my ground. He looked at me for a long second, like he was weighing whether to push it. And he smiled that same calm smile, nodded, and walked away. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the hallway made me jump. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a flood of messages, and they came, just not right away. In the morning, I woke up to a string of texts, long, rambling ones about how he felt like we were meant to be, how he didn't believe in coincidences, how he knew I'd see it too if I just gave him time. I blocked his number, blocked him on every app. For a while, I kept glancing over my shoulder everywhere I went, scanning crowds, waiting for him to pop up. Slowly, the sightings stopped, but the feeling lingered. Looking back, the scariest part wasn't him showing up. It was how normal he made it seem. Like running into me over and over was just fate, like he could rewrite reality to make his presence acceptable. And I keep thinking about that night in my hallway, him holding that coffee cup like it was a peace offering, like he belonged there. That's the image burned in my head. Calm, smiling, convinced it was destiny, while I knew it was anything but. The weirdest second date of my life didn't happen in some exotic place or with some wild activity. It happened in the corner of a cafe that smelled like burnt espresso and bleach, where Kimberly sat waiting for me with a manila folder in front of her. I thought she was maybe grading papers or working on some office thing while she waited. But the second I sat down, she pushed the folder toward me like she was sliding over a menu. I laughed because what else do you do when someone hands you paperwork on a date? I figured it was a joke. Maybe a BuzzFeed quiz she'd printed out, like, which Disney villain are you? Or something dumb like that. But no. When I opened it in bold black letters at the top, it said, non-disclosure agreement. I looked up at her, waiting for her to laugh and tell me she was messing with me. She didn't. She sat there, calm as anything, sipping her cappuccino and watching me like she was grading me. You need to sign before we go any further, she said, straight face, like this was standard procedure. I asked her if she was serious, and she nodded. She told me she couldn't share certain parts of herself without legal protection. I wanted to roll my eyes, but curiosity kept me glued. I skimmed the document. 2 pages, short and to the point. It said I wasn't allowed to record, repeat, or share anything she told me or showed me. No leaking to anyone, no screenshots, no funny tweets making fun of her later. It was absurd. Who the hell needs an NDA for dating? But she slid the pen across the table, eyebrows raised like she expected me to just sign and not ask questions. I should have walked. Any sane person would have walked. But something in me wanted to know what was so important that she needed legal walls around it. So I signed. My name scribbled at the bottom of the page felt like I just opened the door to a very weird room. Once I handed it back, her shoulders relaxed. She smiled, actually smiled for the first time that night, and leaned in. Okay, she said, now I can tell you what I'm working on. Turns out, Kimberly wasn't in finance or law or anything serious like that. She was a writer. At first, that made sense. The NDA thing still felt over the top, but writers can be paranoid about their work being stolen. I thought maybe she was writing a tell-all memoir about her family or some kind of expose. But it wasn't that. She told me she was writing a fictional memoir. That phrase alone confused me. She explained that it was a story about dating in the modern world, but she wanted it to feel raw and authentic. To do that, she'd been going on actual dates, swiping, meeting guys, talking to them, collecting their quirks and stories, and then weaving it all into her draft. Every guy she went out with became a character. Every joke, every nervous habit, every personal detail. They were all material. I sat there stunned while she casually took a sip of coffee. She wasn't dating in the traditional sense. She was mining people. She was collecting us like data points, molding us into fictional characters she could sell. Later that week, I went to her apartment and saw it with my own eyes. She pulled out her laptop and showed me pages from the manuscript. At first, it was vague descriptions of guys. One who always wore baseball caps. One who wouldn't stop talking about Bitcoin. One who cried when his food arrived cold. I chuckled nervously, thinking maybe I'd dodged a bullet by not being in there yet. Then I saw my own words, my own stories. The dumb anecdote I told her about getting lost as a kid on a field trip. It was right there, almost word for word, except the character wasn't me. It was some guy she renamed Ethan. She even kept my phrasing, little verbal tics I didn't even realize I had. I asked her if she really thought this was okay, if she honestly believed she could just turn dates into chapters. She shrugged. Art imitates life, she said. Then she smiled like she just told me a compliment. The NDA made sense now. She knew guys would freak out if they found out, so she locked us down legally first. We couldn't blow the whistle without breaking her rules. After that, every moment with her felt fake. I'd be talking, laughing, just trying to connect. And in the back of my head, I'd picture her typing it all out later, changing my name, sliding me into her manuscript like a puzzle piece. Every detail I gave her wasn't intimacy. It was research. I got paranoid. I started thinking back to our first date. Did she write down the way I stirred my drink? Did she describe my nervous tapping under the table? Even the way I leaned back in my chair when she first smiled, was that immortalized somewhere in her draft? The final straw came when I Googled her name. I found her listed on a small publisher's website. She'd already sold the book. It wasn't just a draft, it wasn't just an idea. It was happening. My stories, my quirks, my words, already headed for print. I confronted her about it, and she didn't flinch. She told me, "Don't you want to be immortalized?" She thought it was romantic. She thought being turned into a character in her book was some kind of honor. But it didn't feel like honor. It felt like theft dressed up in art school language. That night, I went home and dug out the NDA copy she'd given me. I read it line by line, trying to see if there was some loophole, some way to call her out. But it was airtight. I had no leverage. She played the whole thing like a pro. I stopped answering her texts after that. No big dramatic fight, just silence. She sent a couple of messages at first, then stopped. Maybe she didn't care. Maybe she'd already gotten everything she wanted from me. But the thought still lingers. Somewhere out there in a manuscript sitting on an editor's desk is a version of me, a warped version, a character molded to fit her story. My words, my memories, stolen and rearranged. Sometimes I picture strangers in a bookstore someday, flipping through the pages, pausing on a scene, laughing at some dumb line that I actually said. They'll never know it was me. They'll think it's fiction. And maybe that's worse. And I keep coming back to that cafe, the folder sliding across the table, her calm eyes watching me sign. That moment was the most honest part of the whole thing. Everything after was just research. I didn't notice it right away with Zen. At first, he came across as one of those thoughtful, detail-oriented guys who always wanted to make things special. Like on our first date, he showed up with my favorite flowers. I never told him what they were, so I assumed he just guessed lucky or maybe stalked my social media deep enough to find a post. Still, I brushed it off because who doesn't like someone putting in a little extra effort? Our first couple of outings were good. Sushi on night one, a small Italian spot for the second, then a movie at his place for the third. He had this way of making everything feel intentional, like it wasn't random at all. And I'll admit I liked that. I'd had enough sloppy dates with guys who didn't even know where they wanted to go until we were standing outside in the cold. Zen was different. He had a plan. But the plan started getting familiar. Too familiar. On our fourth date, he suggested this coffee shop I hadn't been to in years. When I walked in, it felt weirdly nostalgic, like a place I used to go with someone else. Zen was already there with my order waiting, exactly how I liked it, down to the extra shot of espresso. I didn't remember telling him that. He just smiled and said he had a feeling. At first, I thought maybe he was just one of those hyper-observant people who pick up on details easily, but little cracks kept showing. Like when we went to a Thai restaurant and he ordered green curry without asking what I wanted. I teased him about it and he laughed, then casually added, funny, this was always her favorite. Her. He caught himself right after, smiled like nothing happened, and tried to change the subject. But I heard it. That was the moment my stomach dropped. Suddenly, all the lucky guesses felt loaded. After that, I started piecing it together. Every restaurant, every activity, every pet name. It wasn't random. It was recycled. He wasn't making things special for me. He was recreating something he'd already done. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. One night at his apartment, we were watching a movie and he pulled out a blanket for me. It smelled faintly of perfume, not mine. He said it was just an old blanket, but my brain screamed otherwise. Another time we were walking past a clothing store, and he pointed out a dress in the window, insisting it would look perfect on me. His voice cracked slightly when he said it, like he was trying too hard. I finally asked him about his ex. He shrugged, said they'd been together a while, and that she'd left suddenly. He didn't go into details, just brushed it off like it wasn't worth talking about. But the way he said it, it wasn't clean. It wasn't done. The breaking point came during what should have been a sweet moment. He took me to this park at sunset with a picnic basket. He laid everything out perfectly, sandwiches, chips, a bottle of wine, except none of it was stuff I liked. Not the sandwiches, not the chips, not the wine. He watched me carefully as I bit into one of the sandwiches, like he was waiting for me to play the role he'd already cast. And then it hit me. This wasn't our picnic. This was theirs. I asked him straight up if he was trying to recreate his past relationship. For once, he didn't deflect. He looked at me and said, "You remind me so much of her." He said it like a compliment, like I should smile and thank him. Instead, it made me feel invisible. I wasn't me anymore. I was a stand-in. I chewed that sandwich trying to keep my face neutral, but inside I felt like I'd been erased. Every date, every moment, every choice wasn't about me at all. It was about chasing a ghost. After that, I couldn't unfeel it. I'd noticed how he always compared me, sometimes slipping with a phrase like "you even laugh like she did." I'd noticed how he'd set up dinners exactly the same way every time, like he was following a script. Even the playlist in his car was suspicious. It was too curated, too specific. And when I checked his phone one night, the playlist was literally titled with her name. I started pulling back, answering slower, saying no to plans. He noticed, of course. He started pressing harder, suggesting more outings, more special moments. But I was done playing her part. The last time I saw him, We were sitting at the Italian place again, the one from our second date. The waiter came over, smiled at him, and said, the usual. Zen nodded before I could even open my mouth. He ordered for me like he always did. As the food came out, I realized this had nothing to do with us. I was just trapped in someone else's rerun. I didn't make a scene. I ate quietly, paid for my half, and told him I was heading home. When he leaned in for a kiss, I turned my head. His face dropped for the first time since I'd met him, and I think he finally realized I wasn't going to keep playing along. I never answered his texts after that. I didn't need to. He wasn't really texting me anyway. He was texting her through me. And that's the thing that stuck with me. I wasn't competing with another woman. I was competing with a memory, a version of someone frozen in his head that I could never replace. Sometimes I wonder if he ever stopped, if he found someone new to step into the role, or if he's still out there dragging new people into the same restaurants, the same coffee shops, the same routines, hoping one day someone will line up perfectly with a ghost he can't let go. When I matched with Alice, the first thing that stood out was how confident she sounded. Most people on the app had clunky bios like love dogs, hate drama, or down for adventures, but hers just said, I helped an upgrade. I figured it was a joke, like one of those sarcastic one-liners meant to stand out. She didn't look like a life coach or whatever. I mean, her photos were normal. A couple of selfies, one of her at a brunch spot, one hiking. Nothing screamed guru. We started chatting, and she was sharp. Every message felt polished, like she'd thought about the rhythm of the conversation. She wasn't fumbling for things to say. She'd flip questions back on me, make observations about my answers, even call out little things I didn't notice I was doing. It was smooth, too smooth. Our first date was at a bar with low lighting and those little candles and mason jars on every table. She showed up in a black dress, hair pulled back, not overdressed but clearly intentional. From the second we sat down, she took control of the conversation. She asked about my past relationships, what I thought I was looking for, even what I thought my biggest weakness was. It was less getting to know you and more filling out a personality survey. I joked about it and she laughed, but she didn't stop. By the second date, I started noticing her phone placement. She'd set it on the table, angled slightly toward me. At first, I thought she just wanted to keep an eye on it, like anyone would. But whenever I leaned forward, I caught the faint reflection of the camera lens. My gut told me it was recording. She had a way of framing things that made me second-guess myself. If I told a story, she'd nod, then break it down like she was analyzing it for a class. See, that shows you value loyalty, she'd say, or that response tells me you're conflict avoidant. It was flattering at first, like she really understood me, but eventually it felt less like connection and more like she was diagnosing me. The third time we met up, she invited me to her apartment. It was spotless, almost staged. White walls, neutral furniture, ring light in the corner. That ring light caught my eye. I asked if she did content, and she smiled and said, something like that. While she was in the kitchen pouring drinks, I glanced at her desk. Stacks of printed transcripts sat there, pages covered in highlighted lines and notes in the margins. I picked one up. It wasn't random writing, it was conversations. Word for word dialogue. My dialogue. Things I'd said on our first date. My stomach clenched. When she came back, I asked what it was. She didn't even try to hide it. She grinned, set the drinks down, and said, oh, that's for my course. I must have looked confused because she clarified. She was working on an online program for women, teaching them how to handle low-value men. Her words, not mine, and apparently I was one of the examples. She explained it like she was proud of herself. How she recorded dates, transcribed the conversations, and used them as teaching tools. She said she anonymized everything, but I wasn't buying it. My stories, my quirks, my exact phrasing, they were all right there on the page. I asked if she'd been recording me this whole time. She shrugged. Of course. Consent's implied when you're in public. The casual way she said it made my skin crawl. I wanted to argue, but she kept talking over me, launching into this pitch about how the course was going to sell, how people were desperate for this kind of insight. She even said I should feel honored, apparently, my conflict avoidance made me a perfect case study. The room felt smaller with every word she spoke. The spotless walls, the stage decor, the ring light. It all clicked. Her entire apartment wasn't for living, it was a set. I didn't stay long after that. I made up some excuse about being tired, grabbed my jacket, and left. As soon as I got home, I kept replaying everything she'd said in my head. Low-value men. Case study. Course material. Every laugh, every moment of honesty I've given her, all reduced to bullet points in her curriculum. A few weeks later, my curiosity got the better of me, and I searched her name online. Sure enough, she had a website. Bright colors, professional headshots, and a whole landing page promoting her upcoming program. The tagline read, "Upgrade your love life. Learn to spot weakness before it wastes your time." My chest tightened as I scrolled down. The sample clips blurred out faces, but I recognized the words. Mine. Seeing my own sentences stripped of context, analyzed like evidence, was surreal. Things I'd said casually over drinks were now broken down into teachable moments. She twisted my personality into a cautionary tale. After that, I blocked her. Phone, socials, everything. But I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, my voice, my stories, my mistakes were being packaged and sold to strangers. The strangest part. If you met her cold, you'd never guess. She wasn't sleazy, wasn't unhinged. She carried herself like a professional, like she was doing actual research. And in her mind, maybe she was, but to me, it felt like theft. Sometimes when I see ads online for dating coaches, I wonder how many other Alices are out there, sitting across from someone, nodding, smiling, recording every word, turning real people into course modules. And I keep thinking back to that bar with the mason jar candles. The way she leaned in, asked me about my weaknesses, and nodded like she cared. All the while, her phone angled on the table, capturing me for her audience. When I first started talking to Tyler, he came across like one of those overly reflective types. You know, ones always hinting at how much they'd been through without ever really spelling it out. He had this calm, thoughtful vibe on our first date, the kind where you almost feel like you're in a therapy session instead of grabbing drinks. We met at this dive bar where the lights were dim enough to make everyone look slightly better than they do in daylight. Tyler wore a button down with the sleeves rolled just enough to show off some tattoos, but not so much that it looked like he was trying. He had this soft-spoken way of talking, like every sentence was carefully chosen. At first, it was kind of refreshing. Most guys just blurt whatever comes to mind. Over our beers, he told me how every woman he dated had ghosted him. He didn't sound bitter when he said it, more like defeated, almost philosophical about it. He framed it like he was just unlucky, like the universe had played some cruel trick on him. I felt a little sorry for him, honestly. We went out again a week later. This time it was a quiet dinner spot, small tables, candles that dripped down the sides. He told more stories about his past relationships, always with the same theme. They'd walked away, and he never knew why. I asked if he ever thought maybe he was doing something wrong. He smiled, shook his head, and said, "I've thought about that a lot." His answers were smooth, but they didn't really answer anything. By the third date, the cracks started to show. We were at his apartment, small but tidy, with plants in the corners and shelves stacked with books. He poured us wine and put on some music that felt carefully curated to sound casual. Everything about him felt curated, actually. At one point, while he was in the kitchen, I noticed his laptop open on the coffee table. The screen was dim, but not locked. I shouldn't have looked, but curiosity got the better of me. I tapped the trackpad, and the screen led up to a Reddit tab. The title of the subreddit made my stomach tighten, something along the lines of exposing modern dating. I scrolled just enough to see posts with long paragraphs and blurred out photos. Then I froze, because one of the posts wasn't blurred. It was me. A photo from our first date, me laughing with a beer in my hand. The caption underneath was him describing me in detail, a job, my quirks, even a joke I told. He was asking strangers what they thought about me, if I seemed trustworthy, if I seemed like the type to ghost. My hands went cold. I scrolled further. Post after post, all written by him, all about women he dated. Some were short, just describing what they wore and whether they texted back quickly. Others were essays, analyzing entire conversations, tearing apart little details. The comments were brutal, strangers rating women, speculating about their motives, giving Tyler advice on how to handle us. I slammed the laptop shut right as he walked back in with the wine. He looked at me, then at the laptop, and his face went pale. I asked him what the hell it was. He didn't deny it. He just sighed, sat down, and started explaining. He said the subreddit was a community where people helped each other figure out dating. He said he needed the feedback, that it was the only way he could understand why things kept going wrong. He even said the women he posted about would never find out, like that made it okay. I sat there stunned, trying to process it. My life, my face, my words, all dissected by strangers on some forum. He hadn't just been thoughtful, he'd been collecting. Every detail I gave him wasn't for me, it was for them. I told him I was leaving and he didn't try to stop me. He just looked down at his glass of wine and muttered something about how I'd probably ghost him too. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all those posts, all those blurred photos of other women. How many of them had no idea they were being turned into content for a bunch of anonymous strangers to tear apart? How many were out there still dating, still laughing over drinks, not knowing their smiles were being analyzed in some toxic corner of the internet? The next day, I went back to Reddit. I found the subreddit again and scrolled for hours. His posts were all there, detailed, obsessive. I reported a few, but nothing happened. They stayed up, people still commenting, still picking apart women's lives like puzzles. I blocked Tyler after that. He tried to text a few times, saying I misunderstood, that it wasn't personal. But it was. It was as personal as it gets. Even now, whenever I'm on a date, I catch myself scanning the room, wondering if there's a camera or recorder, or if later that night I'll end up as a post online. It's not just about him anymore. It's about the idea that anyone could be collecting pieces of me to feed to strangers. And when I think back to Tyler's soft-spoken voice, the way he talked about ghosting like it was some tragic mystery, it makes me sick. He wasn't looking for answers. He was looking for an audience. When Jessica told me she was working on herself, I thought she meant the usual things people say after a breakup, journaling, yoga, maybe cutting out alcohol for a bit. She had that kind of vibe on her profile, too, all earthy colors and photos of her at farmers markets or holding books with titles I'd never heard of. Her bio was just one line, trying to grow. I figured it was harmless. Our first date was casual, a coffee shop that looked like it was built out of recycled wood and unfinished ideas. She showed up in this oversized sweater, no makeup, hair tied back, carrying a notebook. She was warm, open, asked thoughtful questions. She kept leaning forward when I talked, nodding, jotting things down occasionally like she didn't want to forget something. I teased her about being a note taker on a date, and she laughed, saying it helped her process. It didn't feel weird then. If anything, it made me feel like she was really listening. We went out again a week later. This time it was a walk by the river, then sitting on a bench with tea she'd brought in a thermos. She talked about mindfulness, about how she was trying to understand emotional patterns. I listened, even though half of it went over my head. I liked that she seemed serious about bettering herself. It made her feel grounded, different from the usual small talk I was used to. By the third date, we were at her apartment. It was neat, organized almost too much so. Plants lined the windowsills, stacks of books arranged by color, sticky notes on the fridge with affirmations. She poured me a glass of wine and put on a quiet music. It should have been cozy. Then she left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. While she was in the bathroom, I glanced over. The screen was glowing, and what I saw made my stomach tighten. A spreadsheet. Dozens of rows, neatly color-coded, each row with a guy's name at the start. Next to the names were columns labeled emotional availability, response time, self-awareness, past trauma, future potential. Each box had a score, numbers, little notes, sometimes full sentences. I scrolled with the trackpad before I could stop myself. My name was there, clear as day. Next to it, opens up slowly, possible trust issues, avoids conflict, laughs easily but might deflect when nervous. There was even a column for likelihood of costing, and I had a 6/10. My chest went tight. I scrolled further. There were at least 40 other names. Some I recognized from apps I'd used, guys I'd probably matched with myself at some point. Each one dissected, evaluated, reduced to metrics. She came back into the room right then. She saw me looking, froze for a second, then smiled like it wasn't a big deal. She walked over, closed the laptop gently, and said, "That's just my little project." I asked her what the hell it was. She explained, calm as ever, that she was using dating as field research. She said she was ranking her dates not to be cruel, but to understand patterns in men. to see what worked, what didn't, who was actually capable of intimacy. She called it her emotional availability metrics. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh to admit it was a joke. She didn't. She poured herself more wine and said it helped her stay objective. The rest of the night blurred. I couldn't stop replaying the phrases I'd read under my name. Avoids conflict. Likelihood of ghosting 6/10. Like I was some lab rat she was observing, not a person she was dating. Over the next week, she kept texting me like nothing was wrong. Sweet messages, little check-ins, links to articles about mindfulness. But every word felt loaded now. Every time I replied, I pictured her copying it into a box, scoring me, turning my thoughts into data. I couldn't help myself. I dug deeper. One night, I searched her name online. Nothing obvious came up, but I did find an old blog she kept. The posts were about relationships, analyzing them in cold, clinical ways. It was the same voice as the spreadsheet, detached, observant, almost scientific. She wasn't looking for love. She was cataloging it. The next time we met, I asked her directly if she actually wanted a relationship or if this was all just research. She tilted her head, thought about it, then said, maybe both, like it was perfectly reasonable to use people while also keeping them close enough to fill the empty space. That was it for me. I pulled away slowly, stopped answering as much, let the distance grow. She didn't chase, not really. Just sent a couple of hope you're well texts before fading into silence. But the thought still lingers. Somewhere in that spreadsheet, my name is still there. My scores, my traits, my flaws, all frozen in her little experiment. I wonder sometimes if she still updates it, if she's added more names, more columns, more numbers, if I've been bumped up or down since then. And I keep picturing the way she leaned forward on our first date, notebook in hand, jotting things down while I laughed. I thought she was listening. She wasn't. She was recording. I should know Nicole was up to something the moment she asked me if I liked podcasts before we even met. It wasn't a casual, oh, do you listen to true crime kind of question either. It was more loaded, like she was testing me. I told her, yeah, sometimes, usually comedy or sports, nothing deep. She just sent a smiley face and said, good to know. I didn't think much about it at the time. Our first date was at this little ramen spot tucked away on a side street, the kind of place with only 8 tables and a menu printed on the wall. She walked in wearing these big headphones around her neck, even though she clearly wasn't listening to anything. I teased her about bringing studio gear to dinner, and she just grinned. She had that confident, chatty energy that fills silence before you'd even notice it's there. The date went fine. She asked a ton of questions, but they weren't the usual small talk ones. They were oddly specific, like, when was the last time you felt invisible in a crowd? Or do you think introverts and extroverts can ever really understand each other? I answered as best I could, fumbling through because I didn't want to look boring. She nodded at everything, eyes lit like she'd struck gold with each response. I thought she was just quirky, maybe a little philosophical. On the second date, she suggested a wine bar. Same thing happened. Lots of questions. Her leaning in close, me doing most of the talking while she smiled and scribbled something in a little notebook she kept on her lap. I joked about her being a journalist, and she laughed it off, saying she just liked keeping track of ideas. By the third date, I started noticing the pattern. She never really talked about herself. If I asked about her job, she dodged it. If I asked about her family, she gave me short answers and flipped it back to me. Every outing felt like a one-sided interview, but she made it feel natural enough that I kept going along with it. The truth came out by accident. One night, I was scrolling through Spotify, looking for something new to play while I cooked. I stumbled across a podcast I hadn't seen before, bright cover art, catchy title about introverts dating extroverts. Out of curiosity, I clicked. The first voice I heard was Nicole's. My stomach dropped. She was hosting. And not just hosting. She was telling stories. Stories about quiet guys she dated, how they reacted to certain questions, how they handled social situations. She framed it as a social experiment, painting herself as the extrovert guide trying to draw them out. Then I heard it. My voice. Not my name, not a direct quote, but it was me. She described a guy she'd met at a ramen shop who admitted he sometimes felt invisible in crowds. She talked about how he hesitated before answering, how his body language shifted, how his laugh was soft but revealing. She turned me into an anecdote, and strangers were listening. I froze, spatula in hand, staring at the stove while her voice kept going. She even played clips, little snippets of me talking, muffled but recognizable. I remembered that first date, her phone on the table face down. I thought nothing of it at the time, but she'd been recording me. I'd listened to more episodes. Each one was about a different guy, different dates, different conversations. She never used names, but the details were clear enough that anyone who knew us could put it together. She'd built an entire show out of dating introverted guys and analyzing them like specimens. I confronted her the next time we met. I walked into the cafe already buzzing with anger, my hands shaking. She looked up from her notebook, smiled, and said, "Hey, you made it." I sat down and told her straight out that I found her podcast. She didn't deny it. She didn't even look embarrassed. She leaned back, crossed her arms, and said, "So you listened. What did you think?" I couldn't believe it. I told her it was creepy, invasive, completely out of line. She argued back that it wasn't invasive because she never used real names, never gave away personal info. She said I should feel validated that my story was interesting enough to share. Validated. That word stuck in my head like a bad song. I left before the drinks even arrived. She texted me later, trying to spin it, saying she thought I'd be proud to be part of something creative. I didn't respond. But it didn't end there. A week later, she dropped another episode. I clicked just to torture myself, and sure enough, there I was again. She called me the one who found out. She described how I looked when I confronted her, how my voice shook with anger, how introverts struggle when their boundaries are tested. She turned my frustration into more content. That was the last time I listened. I blocked her everywhere after that, but I know the episodes are still out there. My voice, my awkward answers, my personal thoughts, all chopped up and packaged for her audience. Now, whenever I see someone with a podcast mic in their Instagram pictures, I feel a jolt of suspicion. I wonder how many people are out there using dating apps not to find someone, but to farm material, to turn real conversations into episodes, to reduce people into lessons for strangers. And I keep replaying that first date in my head, me slurping ramen, her smiling, asking if I ever felt invisible in a crowd. At the time, it felt deep. Now it just feels like bait. Eric came into the picture on one of those nights where I was swiping without really looking, just bored, not expecting anything. His profile was simple. A couple of outdoorsy pictures, one of him at a campsite, another with a big grin leaning against a car. I didn't think much of it until we started messaging. He was funny, a little sarcastic, but not in a mean way. He asked me out pretty quickly, and normally I would have said no, but I figured why not. The first thing I noticed about Eric was that he loved to drive, or at least, he loved being the one behind the wheel. On our first date, he texted me, "I'll pick you up." I told him I could meet him at the restaurant, but he insisted. Something about how he always drives. When he showed up, he was in this silver sedan that looked freshly washed, not flashy, but definitely well kept. I got in, and the car smelled faintly like vanilla air freshener. He had soft music playing and adjusted the mirrors in this confident way, like he'd been doing it forever. The date itself was fine. Dinner at a Mexican spot, easy conversation, a couple of laughs. But what stuck out was how much he emphasized driving me home afterward. I said to grab a rideshare, and he brushed it off like it was absurd. He wanted to be the one to get me there. I thought, okay, maybe he's just old school. Second date, new car. Not just new like he cleaned it, a completely different car. This time it was a navy blue SUV, bigger, shinier, almost too big for him. I asked about the switch, and he just grinned and said, "I've got options." I figured maybe he had two vehicles. Some people do. Didn't seem worth grilling him over. Third date, different car again. A little red hatchback this time, kind of beat up with kids' toys in the back seat. I made a joke about him running a dealership, and he laughed and didn't explain. By the fourth date, I couldn't ignore it anymore. He pulled up in a white pickup truck, and when I climbed in, the glove compartment was stuffed with hardware store receipts, none with his name. I asked about it, and he said, "Oh, that's just my buddy's. I borrow it sometimes." He said it so casually that I almost let it go, but my brain kept tugging at the thread. Why did he always have a different car? One night, while we were driving to a movie, I pushed harder. I asked him straight up how many cars he owned. He hesitated just long enough to make me nervous, then smirked and said, "Depends on the week." That wasn't an answer, but he didn't offer anything else, and the way he brushed it off made me think he wanted me to drop it. It all came out on a night when he had a couple of drinks. We were at a low-key bar, sitting in a booth, and he was looser than usual, leaning back, talking with his hands more. He started rambling about how much he missed driving his own car. I asked what he meant, and that's when he admitted it. He didn't have a license. Not anymore. He'd lost it after a DUI, not just one either. More than one. My stomach dropped. I asked how he'd been driving me around this whole time. He leaned in, lowered his voice like he was sharing some clever secret, and said he had a system. The system, as he explained it, made my skin crawl. He had multiple dating profiles, sometimes under fake names, sometimes with just enough truth to hook people. He'd meet women, get close enough, then ask to borrow their car for an errand. Some let him. Some even gave him their spare keys. He'd keep the cars rotating, using one until he had to return it, then swapping for another. The cars he'd been picking me up in weren't his. They were theirs. Or in some cases, borrowed from friends who didn't even know he was using them for dates. I sat there stunned, staring at him across the sticky bar table. He didn't look ashamed. He looked proud, like he hacked the system. He said, "You gotta do what you gotta do," and laughed like it was all some big joke. Suddenly, all the little details clicked. The different smells, the random chargers, the car seat in the back of the hatchback, the hardware receipts in the glove box. He hadn't been juggling cars because he was rich or practical. He'd been juggling them because none of them were his. After that, I couldn't relax around him. Every time he pulled up, I wondered whose car it was this time, and whether they even knew he was in it. I started refusing rides, telling him I'd meet him at places instead. He didn't like that. He'd get this edge in his voice, saying things like, "Come on, I like driving you." But I couldn't stomach the thought of sliding into someone else's vehicle under his little lie. The last straw was when he showed up in a sleek black sedan I hadn't seen before. I asked whose it was, and he just grinned, leaning on the roof, and said, "Don't worry about it." That was it for me. I told him flat out I was done. He rolled his eyes, called me dramatic, and drove off. A week later, I got a message from a girl I didn't know. She tracked me down through mutuals. She asked if I knew Eric, and when I said yes, she unloaded. She told me he borrowed her car for a quick errand and kept it for 3 days. She had to threaten to call the cops before he brought it back. She said she'd heard from other women who had similar stories, some who'd never gotten their cars back at all. I felt sick, not just because of him, but because I'd let myself get pulled along for weeks without questioning harder. He built his whole dating life around this scam, and I'd been a passenger, literally. I blocked him everywhere, but even now I still get this uneasy feeling when a guy insists on driving me. I think about Eric behind the wheel, grinning, acting like every car was his kingdom when in reality, none of them were. And the worst part, he didn't even see it as wrong. To him, it was just survival, just another hustle. Now when I see someone pull up in a shiny ride on a first date, I don't get impressed. I get suspicious. Because I know how easy it is to fake stability when you're holding onto keys that aren't yours. I matched with Dylan on a Sunday night when I was half bored, half procrastinating laundry. His profile made him look like the kind of guy who practically lived at protests. Photos of him holding signs, a shot of him with a megaphone, another with a group in front of City Hall. His bio just said, "Fighting the good fight, one day at a time." Normally, I swipe left on people who look like they're campaigning on the app, but he had a smile that looked real, not posed. So I swiped right. He messaged me right away. He was sharp, funny, and always bringing the conversation back to causes and movements. At first, I thought it was just his thing. Everyone's got a thing, right? Some guys won't shut up about fantasy football, some about crypto. Dylan's thing was activism. Our first date was at a small vegan cafe. Of course it was. He showed up in ripped jeans and a shirt with a slogan about liberation splashed across it. He talked fast like his brain was always 3 steps ahead. He asked about what issues mattered most to me when I thought about inequality, if I ever marched before. I admitted I hadn't done much beyond donating to a couple charities. He grinned and said, "Don't worry, we'll fix that." I won't lie, it was exciting at first. He had this energy that made me feel like I was part of something bigger just by sitting across from him. Our second date was at a bookshop that doubled as a community space. He pulled me into a discussion circle like it was nothing, introducing me to people I'd never met. Everyone knew him. They patted him on the back, asked about his latest project, called him a real one. I thought, wow, this guy must really be dedicated. By the third date, he invited me to a protest. That's where everything flipped. It was a Saturday afternoon downtown. Crowds of people with signs, chants echoing off buildings, drums beating in the background. Dylan wove through the crowd with ease, high-fiving people, clapping shoulders, like he was the mayor of the place. I stayed close, trying to soak it all in. Then I noticed something odd. Off to the side, near the food trucks, there was a folding table set up. On it were stacks of shirts, hoodies, and tote bags with slogans printed across them. Dylan led me straight there. "Check this out," he said proudly, pointing to the designs. At first, I smiled. The slogans were catchy, bold, the kind of phrases you'd expect at a protest. But then my eyes froze on one of the shirts. The words across the front weren't just familiar, they were mine. A week earlier, I'd been texting Dylan late at night. We were talking about frustrations, and I'd sent in this line, half joking but kind of serious, about how real change starts when people stop treating activism like a weekend hobby. And there it was, plastered on a tote bag, bold font, $25 a pop. My stomach dropped. I picked up the bag, held it out, and asked if he was serious. He grinned like I just complimented him. "Pretty good, right? It's selling fast." I stared at him, waiting for him to admit he should have asked me, but he didn't even seem to realize how messed up it was. He was already busy talking to people, making change for shirts, calling out prices. The guy who'd been all about the cause suddenly looked like a salesman at a street fair. As the protest went on, I kept watching. Dylan wasn't chanting much, wasn't marching. He was behind that table, pushing merch, pocketing cash, telling people the money was supporting the movement. I asked some of the other organizers later if the funds were going to a group, and they gave me a confused look. "That's just Dylan's stuff," they said. I felt sick. When the crowd started thinning, I pulled him aside. I asked him straight up if he'd been profiting off my words. He shrugged, completely unbothered, and said, "Why not?" "They're good words." Like that excused it. He added, "Besides, you should be proud. Your ideas are out there." Proud. I wasn't proud. I felt used. He'd taken something I'd said in private, something vulnerable, and turned it into merch without even asking. I didn't leave right then, though. I wish I had. Instead, I stood there in the fading light, listening as he counted his money and joked about how activism doesn't pay unless you hustle. My chest felt hollow. The next day, I checked his Instagram. Sure enough, he was selling the merch online too. Professional-looking photos of the shirts and bags, captions about supporting change. My light was front and center. No credit, no mention of me, just his brand. That's when I cut him off. I stopped replying to his texts, ignored his calls. He didn't take the hint easily. He sent long messages about how I didn't understand the bigger picture, how I should be grateful to be part of something impactful. I blocked him after that. But the thing that sticks with me is how normal he made it seem. He didn't think he was stealing. To him, it was just part of the hustle, taking words, turning them into profit, slapping activism on top like a label. Sometimes I still see people downtown carrying those tote bags. I recognize my line instantly, bold across the fabric. I never say anything. I just keep walking, my chest tight, wondering how many other people Dylan pulled from. And every time I think about that first night at the cafe and asking me what issues mattered most, leaning forward like he really wanted to know me. All along, he wasn't listening. He was sourcing.